The witness Dr. Felix Morrow had always preferred the company of stars to people. His research station, Cassandra's Eye, orbited the gas giant Kepler 438b at a comfortable distance from the nearest inhabited world, exactly how he liked it. For 12 years he had studied the deep structures of space-time from his self-imposed exile, content to lose himself in equations that described the fundamental architecture of reality. "Felix, you need to see this," called Jinx from the observation deck. His research assistant was barely 25, brilliant beyond measure, and cursed with the kind of manic energy that made Felix feel ancient at 47. "If it's another of your theories about sentient dark matter, I'm not interested," Felix replied without looking up from his calculations. He was deep in the mathematics of dimensional folding, trying to reconcile some troubling anomalies in the local space-time metric. "No, seriously. Something's happening to Kepler 438c. The urgency in Jinx's voice made Felix pause. His assistant had many qualities: enthusiasm, creativity, an alarming tendency to modify station equipment without permission. But panic wasn't usually one of them. Felix set aside his work and made his way to the observation deck. Kepler 438c hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its 3 moons tracing lazy orbits around the planet's equator. Home to nearly 8 million colonists, it was one of the more successful terraforming projects in this sector. Felix had watched it for years, using its gravitational field as a reference point for his experiments. "What am I looking at?" he asked, adjusting the telescope's focus. "Watch the northern hemisphere," Jinx said, her voice tight with concentration. "It started about 10 minutes ago." At first, Felix saw nothing unusual. The planet rotated peacefully. On its axis, white clouds swirling through its atmosphere. City lights beginning to twinkle as the day-night Terminator moved across the surface. Then he saw it. A shimmer in space around the planet like heat distortion, but visible even in the vacuum. "Are you recording this?" he asked. "Every sensor we have." "Felix, look at the quantum field readings." Felix glanced at the displays and felt his blood turn to ice. The quantum field fluctuations around Kepler 438c were off the charts. Patterns that suggested reality itself was becoming unstable in the planet's vicinity. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Those readings would require energy levels equivalent to a stellar collapse." "It gets worse," Jinx said grimly. "I'm detecting similar patterns from 17 other systems, all within the past 6 months." Before Felix could respond, space around Kepler 438c began to fold. Not metaphorically, literally. He watched in horror as 3-dimensional space started to crease and bend like origami in the hands of a cosmic entity. The planet's moons wobbled in their orbits as gravitational constants became suggestions rather than laws. "The people," Felix breathed. 8 million people. "I've been trying to raise them on subspace," Jinx said, her fingers flying over the communication controls. No response. It's like they don't exist anymore. Felix stared at the impossible sight before him. The northern hemisphere of Kepler 438c was beginning to fade. Not exploding, not burning, but simply becoming less real. The cities, the forests, the mountains, all dissolving into quantum probability states. "This is Dr. Felix Morrow at Research, Station Cassandra's Eye," he broadcast on all emergency frequencies. "I am witnessing the systematic erasure of Kepler 438c. The planet appears to be undergoing some form of dimensional collapse. If anyone receives this transmission..." His words were cut off as something responded. The voice that filled the station's speakers was vast and ancient, carrying harmonics that existed in dimensions human ears weren't designed to perceive. When it spoke, the words seemed to bypass Felix's auditory system entirely and resonate directly in his consciousness. "Dr. Morrow, your observations are noted." Felix and Jinx exchanged terrified glances. Whatever was speaking to them knew. Their names had been watching them watch. "What are you?" Felix managed to ask. "I am the Harbinger. I speak for those who harvest. You have questions." Despite his terror, Felix's scientific curiosity asserted itself. "Why are you doing this? What do you want with entire civilizations? Civilizations are inefficient, chaotic. Reality becomes cluttered with their existence. We restore order. We return possibility to its pure state. You're erasing them from existence itself, Jinx said, her voice barely above a whisper. Existence is not binary, young engineer. There are many states of being, many ways to matter. Your species will learn. Felix watched in fascination and horror as more of Kepler 438c faded away. But now he could see the pattern, the way space-time folded back on itself, the mathematical precision of the dimensional collapse. It was almost beautiful in its terrible perfection. This has happened before, he realized. Throughout galactic history, you've been doing this for millions of years. Longer, much longer. Your galaxy is young. Others have required similar gardening. Gardening? Jinx exploded. You call genocide gardening? I call it necessary. Observe. Suddenly, Felix's instruments erupted with data, not about the dying planet before them, but about the structure of reality itself. He saw how dimensions nested within each other like Russian dolls, how consciousness and matter interacted on quantum levels, how the very act of observation shaped the fundamental nature of existence. My God, he breathed. You're not just erasing civilizations, you're preventing them from evolving to the point where they could challenge your control of reality itself. Understanding brings wisdom, Dr. Morrow, but wisdom brings responsibility. The last traces of Kepler 438c vanished, leaving behind empty space where a world had been. Felix stared at the void, trying to process what he had witnessed. 8 million people. Gone not just from life, but from ever having existed at all. The signal, Jinx said suddenly. The one we've been tracking. It's not a distress call or a communication. It's a dinner bell. Perceptive. The signal identifies realities ripe for harvest. When sufficient consciousness has developed, when the quantum field becomes too disrupted by observation and intent, we restore the balance. But why tell us this? Felix asked. Why? Reveal yourself? Because, Dr. Morrow, your species has reached the threshold earlier than most. Your kind's curiosity, your need to observe and measure and understand. You are disrupting the fundamental structures faster than anticipated. Felix felt a chill deeper than the vacuum of space. How long do we have? The harvest has already begun. Your core worlds will be processed within your solar rotations. However, there is another possibility. What do you mean? Some species prove useful, capable of serving larger purposes. Your researchers, your scientists, those who understand the deeper structures, they need not be harvested. They can be preserved, elevated. Jinx stepped closer to Felix, her voice urgent. It's offering us a way out, a chance to survive. Survival, knowledge, purpose beyond your current comprehension. All you must do is cease your resistance, accept the necessity of what comes. Felix stared at the space where a world had been, thinking of the billions of humans living there. Leaves unaware of the cosmic pruning shears hovering over their reality, he thought of Commander Voss and her crew, probably racing toward certain death. He thought of all the other species throughout galactic history who had faced this same choice. And if we refuse, he asked quietly, then you will join the others, in the void. Your choice, Dr. Morrow, but choose quickly. The architects grow impatient. The presence withdrew, leaving Felix and Jinx alone with the terrible knowledge of what was coming. The station's instruments continued to record the empty space where Kepler 438c had been, documenting the absence of 8 million lives. We have to warn them, Jinx said finally. The fleet, the colonies, everyone. Felix nodded, but his mind was racing through the implications of what they had learned. The Harbinger had revealed more than it intended. There were others involved, these architects who commanded the harvest. And more importantly, the process wasn't instantaneous. Across the galaxy, there might be time if they could understand the mechanism to find a weakness. Jinx, begin transmission of all our data to every fleet intelligence station in the network. Include everything. The dimensional mathematics, the quantum field recordings, the conversation with the Harbinger. Code it with emergency priority and forward it to Commander Voss if you can reach her. What about the offer? Jinx asked quietly. The chance to survive? Felix looked at her for a long moment, seeing in her young face all the potential futures that the architects wanted to prune away. Some things are more important than survival, Jinx. Sometimes you have to choose what kind of species you want to be. As they worked frantically to transmit their warning to anyone who might listen, space around their station began to shimmer with the same heat distortion effect they had witnessed around the doomed planet. The harvest was accelerating and they were next on the list. But Dr. Felix Morrow had spent his life studying the deep structures of reality, and he had learned something the Harbinger might not have anticipated. In the quantum realm, observation changed everything. And right now, the universe had 8 billion pairs of human eyes learning to look in directions that reality wasn't supposed to bend. The witness had become something more dangerous than the architects had planned. He had become a teacher, and the final lesson was about to begin. The last stand Admiral Kira Storm stood in the war room of the dreadnought Defiance, watching as red dots disappeared from the tactical display one by one. Each vanishing light represented a star system, a world, millions of lives erased from existence itself. In the past 18 hours, 43 systems had gone dark. Admiral, incoming priority transmission from Research Station Cassandra's. "Aye," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes, her voice tight with exhaustion. The entire fleet had been on high alert since Commander Voss's warning had reached Fleet Command. "Put it through," Kira ordered, though she suspected she already knew what the message would contain. Dr. Felix Morrow's haggard face appeared on the main screen, his research station's bridge visible behind him. "Admiral Storm, this is Dr. Morrow. I'm transmitting all data on the phenomenon, including direct communication with the entity responsible. But more importantly, I believe I've found something they didn't expect us to find." Kira leaned forward. "Go ahead, Doctor." The erasure process isn't perfect. It requires enormous energy to fold reality in on itself, and it leaves quantum echoes, mathematical residue that can be tracked and potentially reversed. These architects, as they call themselves, aren't gods. They're engineers working within the same physical laws we are, just on a scale we hadn't imagined. "Are you saying we can fight them?" Kira asked. "I'm saying we can make them pay a price they haven't had to pay before. Every species they've harvested simply accepted their fate, or tried to run. No one has ever tried to look directly at the mechanism itself and disrupt it through coordinated observation." The bridge shuddered as space around the fleet began to distort. Through the viewports, Kira could see stars beginning to bend and twist as reality folded in preparation for harvest. "All ships, this is Admiral Storm," she broadcast across the fleet. "Implement Protocol 7. Every sensor array, every telescope, every pair of eyes focused on the distortion patterns. If Dr. Morrow is right, our observation itself is a weapon." The response came immediately, not from her ships, but from something vast and ancient that spoke directly into the minds of everyone aboard the fleet. "Admiral Storm, your tactics are interesting, but futile." The Harbinger's presence filled the bridge like a living weight. Kira had faced enemy fleets, hostile aliens, and natural disasters that could crack planets, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer alien intelligence pressing against her consciousness. "I've been expecting you," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the cosmic horror surrounding her fleet. "Dr. Morrow shared your earlier conversation. Tell me, how many species have actually tried to fight back?" "None successfully. Your defiance is noted, but the outcome remains unchanged." "Maybe. But here's what you didn't count on." Kira gestured to her tactical officer. "Lieutenant, show our guest what 8 billion humans can do when they're properly motivated." The main screen shifted to display Earth, Luna, Mars, and the outer colonies. Every surface that could mount a telescope or sensor array was focused on the space around the fleet. Universities, research stations, amateur astronomers, even civilians with handheld instruments, all of them looking directly at the dimensional distortions. Curious. But observation alone cannot The Harbinger's words cut off abruptly as space around the fleet suddenly stabilized. The twisting stars snapped back to their proper positions, and the reality distortions began to weaken. That's 8 billion conscious minds all observing the same quantum event, Kira explained. According to quantum mechanics, observation collapses wave functions, and apparently, if enough minds observe your reality-folding trick simultaneously, we can collapse it back to normal space-time. On cue, Commander Voss's voice crackled over the comm system. Admiral, this is Voss aboard the Meridian. We've linked our signal analysis to every observation post in human space. The mathematical patterns are breaking down under collective observation. Impossible. The calculations do not— Your calculations, interrupted a new voice as Captain Raven Ashford's ship decloaked nearby, didn't account for a species stupid enough to look directly at cosmic horror with every telescope they could find. Ghost. Show them what we've discovered. The AI's sophisticated voice filled the communication channels. Greetings, ancient entity. I've been analyzing your dimensional manipulation techniques, and I'm afraid they're rather outdated. You've been harvesting realities for so long that you've grown complacent. You never adapted your methods to deal with a species that treats the impossible as merely engineering challenges we haven't solved yet. Captain Frost's Iron Maiden joined the formation, weapons powered, but not yet firing. Admiral, we've got incoming bogies, big ones. Through the quantum foam of disrupted space-time, shapes began to emerge, vast geometric forms that hurt to perceive directly, their surfaces reflecting dimensions that human eyes weren't designed to process. The architects had come personally to deal with this unprecedented resistance. The architects themselves come, the Harbinger announced, though Kira detected something new in its vast voice. Uncertainty. You have forced them to take direct action. This has not happened in 12 million years. Good, Kira said grimly. Time they learned what happens when you underestimate a species that weaponizes curiosity. Dr. Morrow's voice joined the growing chorus of resistance. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy buildups around those ships. They're preparing to erase this entire sector, not gradually, but all at once. All ships, combat formation, Kira ordered. Prepare to engage targets that technically don't exist in our dimensional framework. Science Division, I need solutions that shouldn't be possible. The lead architect vessel spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that made reality itself shiver. Your species will be remembered as the first to force direct intervention. This is regrettable, but necessary. Space around the human fleet began to fracture as the architects applied their full power. Stars winked out of existence, replaced by geometric impossibilities that served as conduits for energies drawn from parallel dimensions. The very concept of matter began to dissolve. Now, Kira shouted. Across human space, 8 billion minds focused on a single thought. No, the collective human consciousness, guided by the observations of trained scientists and coordinated through quantum entanglement communication networks, reached out and grabbed reality itself. For one impossible moment, the species that had learned to split atoms and bend spacetime stood united against entities older than their galaxy. The architect vessels shuddered as their dimensional manipulation encountered something they had never faced before, a reality held stable by sheer stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. But the effort was costing them. Kira could see the strain on her crew, could feel her own consciousness stretching to maintain the observation necessary to keep spacetime coherent. Across the fleet, people were collapsing from the psychic effort. Admiral, Ghost's voice was strained. The collective observation is working, but human minds weren't designed for this level of quantum interaction. We can hold them for perhaps 10 more minutes before neural burnout becomes fatal. Then you have chosen extinction over evolution, the lead architect declared. So be it. The architect vessels began to merge, their impossible geometries combining into something that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The energy buildup was beyond anything Kira had ever witnessed. Dr. Morrow, she called out desperately, please tell me you have one more impossible idea. Actually, came Morrow's exhausted but determined voice, I do. But it requires us to do something that goes against every survival instinct. What? We stop observing them, all at once. Completely. That will let them erase us instantly, Commander Voss protested. Maybe, or maybe for just a moment they'll cease to exist in our reality. And in that moment of mutual non-existence we fire everything we have into the quantum vacuum they leave behind. Kira understood immediately. It was insane, suicidal, and completely contrary to every military doctrine ever written. It was also the most human solution she'd ever heard. All stations prepare to cease observation on my mark. All weapons target the quantum vacuum signatures. Fire the instant you can detect targets again. You cannot be serious, the Harbinger said, and for the first time it sounded genuinely confused. You're right, Kira replied. We can't be serious. We're humans. We're the species that looked at the impossibility of faster-than-light travel and said, hold my beer. 3, 2, 1. Look away. For one impossible moment, the entire human fleet deliberately stopped observing the architect vessels. The ancient entities, existing only through the intersection of multiple dimensional frameworks, found themselves suddenly without anchor points in local reality. They ceased to exist for exactly 0.3 seconds. When human consciousness snapped back to full observation, the architect vessels were reforming from quantum probability states, vulnerable, partially materialized, and directly in the path of every weapon the fleet could bring to bear. The barrage was devastating. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and experimental weapons that barely existed outside theoretical physics tore into the reforming architect vessels. Ancient entities that had harvested galaxies screamed in frequencies that shattered dimension barriers. Impossible, the lead architect howled as its vessel began to collapse. No species has ever. That's because, Kira said as she watched the ancient horror dissolve back into component quantum states, no species has ever been quite this absolutely magnificently insane. The remaining architect vessels began to retreat, their geometric forms folding back into dimensions beyond human perception. But before they vanished entirely, the Harbinger's voice echoed one final time. This is not over. The architects are infinite. Others will come. Let them, Kira replied. We'll be waiting. And next time, we'll have had time to prepare. As the immediate threat faded, reports began flooding in from across human space. The quantum echoes of erased worlds were beginning to reform, not completely, but enough to potentially restore what had been lost. The collective human observation had somehow created a buffer in space-time itself. Admiral, Dr. Morrow's voice was filled with exhausted wonder. The quantum signatures suggest that the erased systems are reforming. It's going to take time, and we'll need to maintain observation protocols, but I believe we can actually bring them back. Kira slumped in her command chair, feeling the weight of 8 billion minds disconnecting from her consciousness. They had won, but the victory felt fragile, temporary. The universe was vast, and humanity had just announced their presence too, things that regarded galaxies as gardens to be pruned. All ships maintain defensive positions. Science teams, begin analysis of architect technology fragments, and get me aligned to every world leader in human space. We have a lot of work to do. Captain Ashford's voice crackled over the comm. Admiral, Ghost wants to know if we can keep some of the architect tech. Says it would make excellent salvage. Despite everything, Kira smiled. Tell your AI that humanity just became galactic pest control specialists. I think we'll have plenty of opportunities to study our new enemies. As the fleet began the long journey home, Earth turned in its orbit, unaware that 8 billion of its children had just reached out and grabbed the throat of something that had been eating reality since before their son was born. The harvest was over, but the real work was just beginning. Somewhere in the vast dark between galaxies, ancient intelligences were learning a new word, consequences, and humanity was going to teach them exactly what that word meant.